A firefighter went into a burning barn and vanished. No body. No gear. Just his last radio call. I see something in the back. Then silence. The fire? Labeled an accident. Case closed. But his wife never believed it. And 12 years later, a construction crew knocks down an old house near the same land and hits a hollow wall. Inside, they find a sealed tunnel, and at the end of it, 2 skeletons. One wearing Daniel Rourke's badge, the other shot in the head. No ID, but here's the part no one can explain. Daniel didn't die in the fire. He died trying to expose one. And what they buried with him was never meant to be found. 1. July 14th, 1979, 2:17 a.m. Word count, 250 static. Then Daniel's voice cuts through the radio. I see something in the back, looks like a door. I'm going in deeper. Outside the burning barn, his crew waits anxiously. The blaze is unpredictable, fed by dry timber and stored fuel. The wind shifts fast. Rourke, back out now. Structure's unstable. The chief calls over the channel. No reply. Only the pop of splintering beams and the howl of fire eating air. Another call. Rourke, do you copy? Still nothing. Then suddenly, there's something. The transmission cuts. The line goes dead. Firefighters rush in, hoses blasting. But minutes later, the roof collapses inward. They're forced back. Inside, there's no sign of Daniel. No movement. No scream. Just smoke. When the fire finally dies hours later, they sift through ash and rubble. A section of his turnout coat is found, charred. His radio melted near a scorched wall beam, but Daniel is gone. No body, no helmet, no footprints leading out. At first, everyone assumes the worst. He must have been crushed in the collapse. But as dawn breaks, one detail unsettles the search chief. Daniel's boot prints stop mid-aisle. No drag marks, no fall zone. Just nothing. 2. The man behind the badge, word count, 200. Daniel Rourke wasn't the kind of man who ran from fire. He ran toward it. 34. Marine Corps vet. 2 tours. No nonsense, steady hands, dry sense of humor. The kind of guy who could calm a rookie mid-blaze with just a look. Off duty, he was a family man. Married 12 years. 2 kids. Saturday mornings were for pancakes and fishing rods. He still drove his '68 Ford with the broken cassette deck because his daughter loved the rattling sound it made. But in the last month before the fire, something shifted. He was quiet, restless, caught staring at old maps in the garage. Some nights, he wouldn't come to bed until dawn. He told Laura he was just thinking about fire patterns. At the station, Mike, his younger brother and fellow firefighter, asked if he was okay. Daniel just shook his head and said, "You ever feel like something's wrong and no one else sees it?" Nobody knew what he meant. At least, not yet. It started in late May. A tool shed at the edge of town went up in flames around midnight. No power, no lightning, no explanation. A week later, it was a trailer on an empty lot. Then a pump house on private farmland. 3 fires in 15 days, each one on a different property. Each one ruled accidental, but Daniel didn't think so. He kept copies of the reports, quietly tracing addresses, noting conditions. The burn patterns were too clean. No accelerants, but every fire hit structures connected to land no one had touched in decades. And there was something else. He told Laura once, offhandedly, they're not lighting them to destroy what's inside. They're erasing the land. She didn't know what that meant at the time. At the station, Daniel stopped talking about it. But he kept looking into deed records, topographic maps, old mining plats. And when a long abandoned barn behind Clearwater Road caught fire that July night, Daniel was already halfway there before dispatch even called. At 1:54 a.m., A 911 call came in from a motorist who saw flames through the trees. A barn fire. Rural property, long abandoned. The dispatcher hadn't even finished relaying the location when Daniel grabbed his gear. No hesitation, no small talk. He looked laser-focused. Mike was lacing up beside him. "Wait, you know this place?" Daniel didn't answer. He just muttered, "I need to be first in." He arrived at the scene ahead of the engine. His truck. Door slammed, and within seconds, he was at the front of the barn, radioing in. Flames were already gutting the roofline, but Daniel didn't hesitate. He went in fast, disappearing into black smoke. The crew pulled up moments later. Mike jumped out, scanning for his brother. All he saw was flickering orange through broken slats and the muffled crackle of fire. Then Daniel's voice came over the radio tight, breathless. "There's a structure inside the bar. Some kind of room." It was the last thing they'd hear from him. The team charged in with hoses, axes, and thermal gear, but Daniel was gone. They pushed deeper into the barn's remains, calling his name over and over. No response. Heat warped the metal beams. The fire moved strangely clustered along the back wall, almost like it was feeding from inside the structure. Near the center, they found fragments of turnout gear. One glove, scorched and stiff. A fire radio fused to a charred beam. Still, no body. Mike noticed something strange. Daniel's helmet wasn't anywhere. Neither was his axe. They called in dogs. They combed the woods behind the property. Helicopters swept the area with infrared. Nothing done at first. The department declared him lost in the collapse. But as investigators reviewed the scene, questions surfaced. One in particular. Roughly 18 feet from the fire's edge, in a patch of untouched dirt, a firefighter's axe lay clean, no soot, no scorch marks. It was Daniel's, and it looked like it had been placed there. Not dropped, not thrown. Just left, as if someone walked it out of the fire and never walked back in. 3 days after the fire, the smell of smoke still lingers in the walls. Laura Rourke stands in the doorway of the kitchen, arms crossed, staring at the table. Daniel's seat is untouched. The plate is still there, the same one she set the night he never came home. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes. Cold now. Her son eats in silence. Her daughter picks at her food. No one speaks Daniel's name anymore, but Laura does. She whispers it when folding his shirts. When locking the front door, the town's already started calling it a tragedy. He died doing what he loved, they say. But Laura doesn't believe it. There's no body, no funeral, just a headline. Local firefighter presumed dead in blaze. She looks out the window toward the barn in the distance. The fields are empty. No trucks, no tape, no crews. Everything's gone, like it never happened. But Laura knows something's wrong. She just doesn't know how deep it goes yet. At the station, everything looks normal. Too normal. Mike Rourke steps through the locker room where his brother once suited up. Daniel's nameplate is still there, but the locker is empty. Cleaned out. He finds Chief Patterson in his office. Asks straight out, "Who cleared Daniel's locker?" The chief hesitates. "Protocol," he says. "Family gave permission." Mike shakes his head. "I'm family. Nobody asked me." The chief shifts. "It was a mistake." "Just grief protocol, Mike? Let's not dig." But Mike is already digging. He checks call logs, radio timestamps, equipment signouts. The dispatch time doesn't match his memory. Daniel left before the fire was officially called in. Mike presses an engineer who was on shift. The guy lowers his voice. "Your brother didn't wait for backup. He got there fast. Too fast. Like, he knew it was gonna happen." Mike's jaw tightens. "What else?" The engineer looks over his shoulder. "After it happened, someone from City Hall came through. Picked up some papers from the briefing room. Didn't say what. Mike walks out of the station with one clear thought. Someone is hiding something. Laura spends 3 hours at the county office. Flipping through paperwork she's technically not supposed to see. Then she finds it. The initial fire investigation report, filed 12 hours after the blaze, says the fire started near the rear support beams. A side note mentions unnatural charring near a locked back room. She compares it to the public copy released 2 days later. That entire paragraph is missing. Even stranger, the investigator's name is scratched out in the revised version, replaced with consultant review pending. Laura drives home, hands trembling on the wheel. She calls Mike. They compare timelines. He pulls Daniel's inspection notes from an old toolbox in the garage. Copies Daniel had given him weeks earlier. There's a detail in Daniel's notes about the barn. 2 underground vents. West side. Possible access tunnel? That line doesn't exist in any official report. Laura calls the department to request a copy of the full scene photos. She's told the file is sealed due to ongoing city review. But there is no active investigation. No review. Just silence. And a growing wall between truth and whoever sealed it off. Mike didn't expect much when the tip came in. Just a neighbor's kid saying he saw something weird the night of the fire. But something in Laura's voice convinced him to go. 13-year-old Eli Granger lived less than a quarter mile from the old barn, in a weathered blue house near the edge of the river. Mike found him sitting on the back porch, swinging a fishing lure on a nylon thread. His mom hovered nearby, but gave them space. Eli didn't make eye contact. "I wasn't supposed to be out that late," he muttered. Mike kept his voice calm. "You're not in trouble. Just tell me what you saw." Eli pointed toward the trees. "I was down by the water. Around 1:30, maybe earlier. I heard sirens in the distance. But before that, I saw this guy." "What guy?" Eli hesitated. "Big, wearing some kind of coat. He was dragging something heavy. Looked like gear, or maybe a body. I don't know. But he was heading away from the barn. Not toward it." Mike's stomach dropped. "Toward where?" Eli glanced at the tree line. "Old path. Leads to the mining ridge. Nobody goes out there anymore." Mike relayed everything to Laura. The altered report, the empty locker, and now a witness. They brought it all to the county sheriff's office. Eli's statement, the original inspection notes, even the marked-up map Daniel had drawn months before his death. But the moment the word reopen was mentioned, the tone changed. The sheriff glanced at the report, then leaned back in his chair. "Son, we've all been through a lot, and I know you're grieving, but this case was closed for a reason. A fireman died in a fire. That's the job." Mike snapped. "He didn't die in that fire. You know it. Someone moved him. Someone cleaned it up." The sheriff nodded slowly, then folded the file closed and slid it back across the desk. "You should stop digging, Mike." Later that week, a deputy pulled Mike aside behind the station. Older guy, been around. Not the type to scare easy. He lit a cigarette, looked both ways, and said quietly, "You're looking in the wrong direction." "What the hell does that mean?" Mike asked. The deputy exhaled smoke, eyes fixed on the gravel. "You think this was one bad guy covering his tracks? It wasn't. This thing's got roots. City Hall, Land Commission, maybe even your own department." Mike froze. "Are you saying Daniel was murdered?" The deputy flicked his cigarette. "I'm saying whatever happened to your brother didn't start with that fire. And it won't end with you asking questions." He walked off without another word. That night, Mike sat in his truck for over an hour, staring at the ridge beyond the tree line. He finally knew where to look. But now he had to decide if it was worth the cost. 1. 2 weeks before the fire. Word count, 250. The garage smelled like oil, dust, and burnt coffee. A single bulb hung overhead as Daniel hunched over a folding table, red Sharpie in hand. On the wall in front of him, a large county map had been tacked up with masking tape. Several properties were circled: barns, sheds, trailers. All gone now, all burned. He didn't say much, even when Mike came by. Just pointed at the lines. "You see this pattern?" Daniel asked. Mike leaned in. "That's all farmland, abandoned." "Exactly." Daniel pointed again, this time at a narrow green band weaving through the circles. "Old mining territory. These aren't random fires. Someone's erasing a footprint." Mike frowned. "A footprint of what?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he opened a binder filled with inspection photos and handwritten notes. "They're not torching what's inside," he muttered. "They're wiping out the land." He had marked every fire on that map. No two were more than 5 miles apart. Every structure destroyed had been built on or near long defunct mine shafts. Daniel didn't know the full picture yet, but he was getting close, and someone somewhere knew it. Daniel's break came from a rusted filing cabinet buried in the back of the county records room. He had told Laura he was running errands. In reality, he spent 4 hours combing through land transfer documents and mineral rights records. And there it was: Renrock Minerals, incorporated in 1931, dissolved in 1959. The file was thin too thin. Just a one-page summary, 2 lawsuits, and a note about a quiet settlement after 3 worker fatalities at a Clearwater Ridge site. But what grabbed Daniel's attention was the land log. Dozens of plots transferred over the years, many still under shell companies with vague names like Grange Resources, Tri-Peak Holdings, and Clear Valley Trust. Every single property he had circled on the map traced back to Renrock, even the barn. Daniel photocopied everything and kept it locked in a small tin box beneath his workbench. That night, he told Mike, Renrock wasn't just a failed mining company. It was a front, and I think someone's trying to bury what's left. Mike looked at him like he'd gone too far. Daniel didn't care. He finally had a name, and that name had blood under it. Daniel dug deeper. It didn't take long before he found the money. Insurance payouts had been issued for at least 6 of the burned properties. Most went to companies that no longer existed, dissolved within days of the claim. One name appeared more than once: Hollings Development Group, registered out of state. The same company that, years earlier, had tried to buy up rural plots near Clearwater for reclamation use. Daniel wasn't sure what reclamation meant in this context, but the payout totals weren't small. $80,000 here, $120,000 there, all paid for condemned buildings on worthless land. He made calls, quiet ones, asked questions to people in zoning, code enforcement, even insurance agents he knew. Some didn't pick up. One finally did and warned him to stop. "You didn't hear this from me," the man said. "But these fires, they're not just about insurance. They're about access. Someone wants those sites cleared and clean. No history, no questions." Daniel hung up, sat in his truck, and stared out at the barn beyond the ridge. Then he opened his glove box and pulled out the flashlight. He was going to check the property that night, alone. He didn't tell anyone, not even Mike. 2 days after the memorial, Laura walked into the garage with a box of fresh folders. She was going to organize Daniel's notes, maybe make sense of what he'd been chasing, but the workbench was empty. The map was gone. His inspection binder, the tin lockbox under the bench, even the scrap paper he'd stuffed in coffee mugs, all of it had vanished. She checked the trash. Nothing. No burn pile. No accidental cleanup. Laura called Mike. He came over immediately, checking everything himself. He knew Daniel kept backup copies, notes, photos. None of it was there. The next morning, Mike stopped by the fire station. He walked straight to Daniel's locker. Unlocked, stripped bare. Uniform gone. No badge. No gear. Just dust. He confronted the crew. One of the rookies shrugged. Chief said to clear it out. Standard protocol after a fatality. Mike stared at him. Fatality? There's no body. The rookie didn't respond. Later, Mike asked the chief who authorized the cleanup. He didn't get an answer. Just a tired look and a deflection about grief processing and letting the family heal. But Mike wasn't grieving anymore. He was getting angry. Weeks passed. Lavra had stopped talking about the missing notes. The kids had gone back to school. But Mike kept digging. One morning, while getting coffee at the gas station, he ran into someone unexpected, Walt Hemley, a retired janitor who'd worked at the station for nearly 30 years. Walt hadn't been around much since retirement. But he pulled Mike aside with a quiet urgency. I saw something strange, he said. Couple nights after the fire, Mike leaned in. Go on. Walt lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. I still had keys. Was finishing up my final shift, cleaning out lockers and doing inventory. Around 11 p.m., a car pulls up out back. Didn't recognize it. No markings, no lights. A man stepped out. Mid-40s, pressed shirt, tie loosened. Not from the station. Not from town. He came in with purpose. Used a key. Didn't speak. Walked straight to Daniel's locker. Pulled out a red folder. Thick, rubber band around it. Mike's stomach tightened. You sure? Dead sure. He left without saying a word. Whole thing took 2 minutes. Mike asked if he could describe the guy. Walt just shook his head. I didn't get a good look. But I know this. That folder? It wasn't station issue. Looked personal. Looked important. That night, Mike pulled Daniel's spare map from his own glove box. The only thing he'd copied months earlier. On it, Daniel had written one thing in the corner. If something happens to me, check who benefits. Mike finally understood. Someone already had Dot by February 1980. The file was sealed. A brown cardboard box, stamped with case number 790714F, was slid onto the cold steel shelf of the county records basement. The label read, Accidental Death. No foul play. Inside the box, a melted radio, 1 glove, and 5 grainy Polaroids of a scorched barn. No report on the missing inspection notes. No mention of the second timeline. No reference to the boy by the river. Just silence. The fire marshal's official summary was a single page. Structural collapse due to unknown ignition source. Presumed fatality. Recovery not possible. No internal review. No inquiry. No follow-up audit. Didn't matter how many times Laura called. It didn't matter how many times Mike asked for answers at the station. The same response came every time. There's nothing more we can do. Over time, Daniel's name disappeared from conversation. The department stopped mentioning him during morning briefings. His picture was taken down from the wall of honor.at. Home, Lavra boxed his belongings. Their daughter stopped asking when he'd come back. Even some of the crew who once called Daniel a hero began to avoid the topic entirely. To the system. It was over, but it never really ended. It was buried by summer. Mike couldn't take it anymore. The department he once trusted felt rotten. Like every hallway echoed with things no one wanted to say out loud. He walked out of a morning briefing mid-sentence. Turned in his gear without a word. No retirement ceremony. No send-off. Just silence. Friends tried to talk him out of it. Don't let this kill your career, one said. But Mike had already made peace with the fact. There was no career left worth saving. He spent that fall helping Laura around the house, watching the kids, fixing the plumbing that Daniel used to ignore. But he was never really there. He kept going. Back to the ridge behind Clearwater. The path through the woods where Eli claimed he saw a man dragging something heavy. The trees were quiet now. The barn had been torn down. The soil had grown over. One night, sitting by the edge of that tree line, Mike said it out loud for the first time. Whatever took Daniel. It wasn't just fire. It felt like the first truth he'd spoken in a year, and for now, it was the only one he could hold. On to the rest? Still buried Dot, and no one wanted it found. After Mike resigned, the visit slowed. The phone calls stopped. People didn't know what to say anymore, or didn't want to say anything at all. Laura stopped waiting for apologies. She went back to work full-time at the pharmacy and picked up night shifts cleaning office buildings. 2 jobs, 1 purpose. Keep the lights on. The house stayed quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from a hole that never got filled. Daniel's photo remained on the mantel. Uniform pressed, eyes steady, smile faint. Every morning, Laura passed it without looking. Every night, she turned it toward the wall. The kids stopped asking questions. Not because they stopped caring, but because they stopped believing anyone had answers. Their daughter, Rachel, drew pictures of her father in her school notebook, always in a fire truck, always driving away. Their son, Jamie, never spoke of him. Not once. Holidays came and went. No grave to visit. No service to attend. By 1985. Even the neighborhood started forgetting. Daniel Rourke wasn't mentioned in firehouse stories anymore. New recruits didn't know his name. A few people still remembered. A few still wondered. But mostly, time did. What it always does. Had moved on. And so did everyone else. Except Laura. From 1980 onward, it was as if someone flipped a switch. No more bonfires. No more sheds, trailers, or pump houses burned in the night. Whatever had plagued the county, whatever pattern Daniel had started to uncover, just stopped. Insurance reports showed nothing unusual. Fire logs went quiet. Even the arson investigator who once flagged Daniel's case retired suddenly in early 81. To the outside world. It looked like stability, a return to normal. But to Mike, it felt off. Like someone had crossed a finish line. He told Laura once, while helping, repair a kitchen drawer. You don't hide something by drawing attention to it. You hide it by stopping. She didn't respond. But she knew what he meant. Still, neither of them could prove anything. No evidence, no movement. No reason for officials to reopen what was now just another cold case on a shelf. The thing that frightened Laura most wasn't the silence. It was how complete it felt. Not like a mistake had been made, but like a plan had run its course, and whoever ran it no longer had anything left to burn. That kind of quiet isn't peace. It's control. And it was everywhere. Even inside their own home. By 1987. Nearly every abandoned property near Clearwater Ridge had been purchased, rezoned, or leveled. The town was changing, pushed along by developers and a quiet city initiative to restore and repurpose unused land. No one made a fuss. Most owners had already left, except one. Glenn Tolliver, 62, had lived alone in a cabin less than a mile from the site of the original barn fire. A war vet, ex-mechanic, and, according to most, a harmless recluse. But when city officials offered to buy his land, twice, then 3 times, Glenn refused. He didn't ask for more money. He didn't negotiate. He just said no. Mike caught wind of it from a former zoning clerk who used to grab beers with him. Said Glenn was paranoid lately, talking about things under the soil. Laura listened quietly as Mike relayed the story. He told him, Mike said, there's something buried out here, and I ain't letting you cover it up. Those were his exact words. No one pressed him after that. But neighbors noticed new faces near his property. Men in plain trucks, parked on the roadside, quiet, watching. No one said who they were with. And Glenn didn't say anything else. Either. Until 1 month later. It was the first week of October when a hunter stumbled on the body. Glenn Tolliver was found face down in a shallow ravine near his own property line, a single rifle round through the base of his skull. His shotgun lay nearby. Safety still on. No signs of a struggle. The county called it a tragic hunting accident. Must have tripped, they said. Weapon discharged. But Glenn's sister, who lived out of state, wasn't buying it. She told reporters he never hunted alone and never used that trail. The autopsy was rushed. The body cremated 2 days after the report filed. Mike showed up at the sheriff's office with Glenn's last quote written on a notepad. "There's something buried out here." They didn't even look at it. One deputy said offhandedly, "You really think a dead fireman from '79 has anything to do with a guy slipping in the woods?" Mike didn't answer. He didn't need to. The pieces were starting to link themselves. The fires, the cover-ups, the missing reports. And now, the one man standing in the way, gone with a bullet and no questions asked. The official case file was closed in under 48 hours. Glenn's land was sold 5 months later to a private holding company. No one ever saw who signed the check. After Glenn Tolliver's sudden death, the land went quiet again. No more strange trucks. No more hunters. Just winter creeping in. But by the end of 1989, survey markers began popping up. Plastic flags. Spray-painted trees. Mike noticed first. He walked the perimeter of the old barn site, the same ridge where Daniel vanished. The brush was cleared. The soil freshly turned. No signs. No announcements. Nothing in the local paper. Then, in early 1990, the Town Planning Commission held a closed-door vote. 7 abandoned parcels, including the land behind the barn, were quietly bundled and sold to Grange Valley Holdings, a Delaware-based firm with no physical office in state. Lavra found the property record by accident, buried inside a zoning ledger while doing paperwork for her second job. The listed purpose? Private development, unspecified. There were no objections. No press coverage. No resistance. No one even knew it happened. Except for Mike. He drove out there again, parked at the tree line, and walked the length of the ridge in silence. The barn was long gone. The dirt was packed, and a thin metal post now marked the edge of what used to be Daniel's last known location. A simple white tag fluttered at the top. Lot number 47C. Authorized access. Only, Mike didn't touch it. He just stared. 12 years, and whoever had started this, they weren't done. They'd just gotten what they came for. Quietly, cleanly, and buried beneath layers no one was meant to dig through again. 1. Demolition Day. Word count: 300. April 3, 1991. The crew showed up just after sunrise. It was a small team. 3 men, 1 foreman, contracted by the city to level a long-condemned farmhouse on the outskirts of Clearwater. The place had been vacant for years. Windows boarded. Floor sagging. Locals said it was unlivable, full of mold and asbestos. But the location was what made Mike notice. The old house sat just 600 feet from where Daniel's barn once stood. By mid-morning, most of the second floor had been torn away. The crew moved inside to dismantle the first-level supports, starting with the northeast corner wall. That's when Foreman Craig Beller paused. He tapped his crowbar twice against the plaster. Thud, thud. Then again. Thud. Clunk. A different sound. Something's off here, he muttered. They cleared the paneling, expecting maybe old water damage or rot. Instead, Beller found fresh nails. Too clean for a structure this age. He tapped again. Hollow. Dead space behind it. He called the city inspector. They halted the job. 2 hours later, a structural engineer arrived. Might be a bootlegger wall, he guessed. They used to hide stills during Prohibition. But what they'd find next wasn't history. It was evidence, and it had been waiting 12 years. At 3:12 p.m., Demolition resumed. Beller swung a sledgehammer once, twice, and the wall cracked. On the third strike, it split open. The room went silent. The plaster had collapsed inward, not out. Behind it was no pantry, no closet, no hidden stairwell. Instead, a narrow opening, roughly shoulder width, lined with old timber supports, dirt walls on both sides, and deeper in, a tunnel. Hand dug, reinforced, hidden in plain sight. The foreman dropped his light. It rolled 3 feet in and stopped. The beam caught something just inside, splintered wood, and wire mesh. Then the smell hit them. Thick, rotted, sharp. One of the crew gagged and stepped back. "Call it in," Beller said, already walking out the door. By sundown, the property was sealed off. Tape went up. Deputies arrived. But even then, no one knew what they were looking at. Not yet. It wasn't until the forensic team stepped in with floodlights and saw the charred supports, the blackened soil, the singe marks that led into the earth, that something clicked. This wasn't a bootleg tunnel. This was a burial site, and someone had gone through a lot of effort to seal it up. Alive or dead. They hadn't gone willingly. By nightfall, state investigators were on site. The tunnel had been cleared down to 10 feet. Floodlights lit the hollow like a stage. Hazmat suits rustled in the dark. 2 officers crawled in first, slowly guided by cable line and oxygen sensors. The deeper they went, the stranger it got. 10 feet in, scorched rock, pockets of heat-blasted stone, fused like melted glass. 15 feet, a rusted pulley hook bolted to a crossbeam. Its chain snapped. 20, a canvas tarp, stiff with time, flecked with dark stains. One investigator peeled it back and froze. Blood. Old, brown-black, soaked through. Just past the tarp. The tunnel opened into a hand-cut cavern, 20 by 20 feet. Walls lined with soot. And in the far corner, bones. Human. Collapsed against timber. Partial firefighter gear still clung to what was left. A cracked helmet, melted rubber, scorched jacket sleeves. One boot remained intact. Inside it, rolled tightly in a plastic sleeve, was a folded map. Laura's handwriting, the same one she'd reported missing in 1979. The room fell silent. Then a second. Flashlight swept right. Another body. No turnout gear. Civilian clothes. A gunshot wound to the head. They weren't alone down there, and they never had been. The dust hadn't settled when one of the forensic techs leaned in closer. Flashlight trembling slightly. What remained of the first skeleton was pressed against the cavern wall, crumpled in a semi-seated position. Ribs collapsed inward. Arm draped limply across a broken timber brace. Next to it lay a scorched turnout jacket, mostly intact, but fused at the seams. The patch on the shoulder was faded but readable. Clearwater Fire and Rescue. A melted helmet sat inches away, visor long gone. The plastic had run like wax, but it was the boots that confirmed it. One was gone completely, but the other, still lodged under the body's left shin, held something inside. An officer carefully lifted it, pulled free a rolled piece of plastic, weathered and brittle. Inside it, a map. Drawn by hand. Red X's marked several burn sites. Across the county, the same properties Daniel had circled in his garage back in single quote 79. Someone whispered, "No way." The final confirmation came in the form of a thin metal tag, resting just beneath the jawbone, a firefighter badge, blackened, but legible. Rourke, D. Mike was called that night. He didn't speak for a full minute. When he did, it was just one sentence. They left him there, like garbage. But someone hadn't just left Daniel. They'd sealed him in, alive. Or not, they meant for him never to be found. As they expanded the search radius around the first body, one of the techs noticed something strange about the far wall. A low depression in the dirt, half covered by collapsed timber and soot-caked rubble. They cleared it slowly. Hands brushed past what looked like torn fabric, not gear, but civilian clothes, then bone. A second skeleton, this one, positioned face down. Arms stretched out, as if crawling before impact. A cracked molar glinted under the light. And at the base of the skull, a small, clean hole. Entry wound. Gunshot. Whoever this was didn't die in the fire. They were executed. There was no wallet, no tags. But their clothing, a collared dress shirt and slacks, was unusual for a fire zone. Not a squatter, not a vagrant. The room filled with a sharp new energy. Everyone knew what this meant. Daniel hadn't just been sealed inside with no help. Someone else had gone in with him and never came back out. The remains were bagged and sent for analysis. Weeks later, the lab called with a match. Dental records confirmed the second skeleton as Richard Greaves, former Clearwater fire chief, the same man who had retired suddenly just 5 weeks after Daniel's disappearance. The same man who signed off on closing the Rourke investigation. The same man no one had seen since 1980. Now, he was here dead, shot, and buried with the man whose case he shut down. There was no more doubt. This wasn't a cave in. It was a cover-up. And someone had killed to keep it that way. As investigators processed the scene, the physical evidence told one story, but raised a dozen others. Why was Daniel's turnout gear still intact if he died in a structural collapse? The helmet was melted, yes, but the jacket, still worn across his frame, showed no signs of blunt trauma. No crushed bones. No broken spine. Then there was the burn pattern. The cavern walls were scorched black, not from a fire that burned its way in, but from one that started inside the chamber itself. Fire damage radiated outward from the center, searing timbers and baking the soil. Experts said it looked like a flashover event, where intense heat consumes all oxygen in a space, meaning Daniel may have still been breathing when it ignited. But the most disturbing discovery was the exit itself. Roughly 6 feet from where Daniel's body lay, the tunnel entrance had been sealed with heavy timber and twisted wire mesh like a crude gate. Someone had taken time, not just to trap, but to secure the cavern. They didn't bury him in a panic. They engineered his prison. Why? And why was Richard Greaves, the former fire chief, in there with him, face down, shot in the head? 2 men, 1 burned, 1 executed. Whoever did this had access, and a reason. Now, after 12 years, the questions weren't just resurfacing. They were demanding answers. The state medical examiner's report came back 10 days after the tunnel was uncovered. It confirmed what Laura, Mike, and a few others had suspected, but never dared say out loud. Daniel Rourke didn't die in the fire. His lungs were clear. No smoke, no soot, no thermal damage in the windpipe. The gear had shielded him, yes, but that only bought him time. He'd survived the blaze, but he never made it out. Drag marks in the tunnel floor, confirmed by forensics, told a chilling story. The impressions were deep, angled, consistent with someone pulling a body backward through a confined space. Not stumbling, not crawling. Drag. Investigators also found blood smears along the wall just past the tunnel entrance. Preliminary analysis showed 2 DNA types, one matching Daniel, the other still unknown. It wasn't just a sealed cavern. It was a scene, planned, executed, and hidden for over a decade. The wire mesh across the tunnel wasn't for containment. It was a lock. Someone had ensured Daniel wouldn't be found, not alive, not dead, until the trail had gone completely cold. But they hadn't counted on a demolition crew. And now, the secret they buried had started digging its way back out. The other body, the one face down, shot execution style, took longer to identify. No wallet, no tags, But the dental records didn't lie. It was Chief Harold Knox. He'd retired in August of 1979, just 3 weeks after Daniel vanished. No farewell party, no press. Just gone, quietly. Back then, it looked like a private man stepping away from duty. Now it looked like an escape route that didn't work. Records showed Knox had signed off on the final barn fire report. He also authorized closing the investigation within days of Daniel's disappearance. Despite evidence still being processed, the most damning detail came from Knox's own personnel file. It was missing. Not purged, just gone, like someone had reached in and wiped his history clean. According to Mike, Knox had seemed nervous during the weeks following Daniel's disappearance. Not guilty, just cautious. Now, his body was found beside Daniel's. Only one conclusion made sense. Knox had been involved either in covering something up or in helping orchestrate it. But somewhere along the line, he became a liability, and someone made sure. He never spoke again. Inside the sealed boot, along with the map, investigators found a folded scrap of notebook paper, brittle, faded, and barely legible. But it was Daniel's handwriting. The notes listed 4 addresses, each tied to fires he'd responded to in the 6 months before his death. Next to each one was a set of initials and a dollar amount. Cross-referencing those addresses with insurance records exposed a disturbing pattern. Payouts made to shell companies, all of which traced back to dummy accounts created through a holding firm, Renrock Minerals. The same company Daniel had researched in his garage. The same company that supposedly shut down in 1959. The map matched his original burn pattern, only now it had additional markings, arrows, exclamation points, and one word repeated 3 times in red ink: dumping. Daniel had uncovered more than arson. He'd uncovered illegal chemical disposal on private lands, covered up by intentional fires, erased records, and city insiders. And someone found out. That's why his locker was emptied. That's why his notes disappeared. He wasn't just killed. He was silenced because his puzzle was nearly complete. And now, 12 years later, every piece was finally in place. The news of Daniel's discovery spread fast, but quietly. The city kept things close. Vague statements about remains recovered and a possible historical connection. But behind the scenes, people were rattled. One of them finally cracked. A week after the idea of Chief Knox went public, a retired city planner named Joseph Langley reached out to investigators through his attorney. He was 81, battling emphysema, and claimed he had something to get off his chest before he died. In a private deposition, Langley revealed the unthinkable. The fires were part of a coordinated cleanup. Renrock Minerals had operated for years, beyond its supposed 1959 closure, funneling waste into old mining shafts, abandoned wells, and defunct rural lots. When an anonymous EPA complaint threatened to expose them in 1978, they needed a solution. According to Langley, the plan was simple: burn the sites, call it accidental, clear it all before the feds came sniffing. A few people on the inside knew. A few fire officials, some city zoning staff, even a couple of local deputies. They didn't set the fires themselves. They just made sure no one looked too hard. Daniel Rook was never supposed to connect the dots, but he did. And when he did, someone made the decision: burn it all. Mike had heard rumors for years, whispers in bars, glances at old reunions, but no one ever talked. Not directly. Until now. After Langley's statement, Mike called Captain Dennis Marlowe, his former supervisor at the Clearwater Fire Department. They hadn't spoken in over a decade. Marlowe picked up, and Mike, without warning, hit record. The conversation started casual, catching up, memories, nothing suspicious. But once Mike mentioned Daniel's name, the silence was heavy. Then Marlowe said something that made Mike freeze. Knox knew. He said it like a fact. No doubt. No hesitation. Mike pressed him. Knew what? Marlowe exhaled. That Daniel was digging. He had a file. I saw him with it. Red folder, station locker. Knox made sure it disappeared. Mike asked one last question. Why was Daniel in that tunnel? Marlowe's voice dropped. They used the fire as cover. Knox told the probie to radio false collapse. While the rest of us were focused on the north wall, they dragged him. A long pause. He was breathing when they took him in. Mike ended the call and handed the recording to state investigators. Suddenly, this wasn't just a cold case, Dodd. It was conspiracy, cover-up, and murder. On department grounds, Dodd, with the confession in hand. Investigators turned their attention back to the tongue, the crude seal of wire mesh and heavy timber that had kept Daniel hidden for over a decade. Forensics confirmed it wasn't random. The placement of the braces, the angle of the support beams, the layering of timber slats over the mesh. It wasn't a panic job. It was engineered. That someone had known exactly how to close off a shaft permanently. And the name that surfaced again and again in the construction records. Harold Knox Dodd, before becoming fire chief. Knox had worked as a safety inspector for Renrock Minerals during the 1960s. His name listed on multiple internal memos and site logs archived in county storage. Back then, Renrock crews were trained in emergency tunnel containment, a process designed to prevent gas leaks or cave-ins from reaching the surface. The seal used in Daniel's case? It matched that protocol exactly. Knox hadn't just approved the cover-up. He physically built it, Dodd, and when someone, maybe Daniel, maybe someone else, threatened to expose that, Knox went into the tunnel himself, whether he intended to silence Daniel or negotiate. No one will ever know. But only one of them had a gun, and neither of them made it back out. By the time all the evidence was laid out, the map, the wire mesh seal, the confession, and the two bodies buried in the earth. One thing had become painfully clear. Daniel Rourke hadn't just stumbled into danger. He'd walked into it with eyes open. The notes in his handwriting, the marked fire sites, the insurance trail. It wasn't curiosity. It was an investigation. One he ran alone because no one else would touch it. He knew something was wrong, and the closer he got to the truth, the more dangerous he became to. The people who built their power on silence, they didn't just kill him. They erased him, took his files, wiped his locker, sealed him in a blackened hole in the ground, and rewrote the story as a tragic accident. And somehow, it worked for 12 years. But it was the details that survived. A boot, a map, a nameplate half buried in soot. Each one refusing to stay. Buried. In the end, Daniel didn't make it out of that tunnel. But the truth did. And it came with names, numbers, and proof. Laura had always said Daniel wouldn't have just walked away. She was right. He never left. They locked him in, and still he found a way to speak. The headlines were impossible to ignore. Missing firefighter found. 2 bodies recovered in sealed tunnel. Former fire chief dead. Foul play suspected. Clearwater. The town that had long buried its questions was now drowning in them. Residents who'd once accepted the official story now looked at each other with unease. The fire that supposedly claimed Daniel Rourke had always felt strange. But no one thought it was murder. Now, that word was everywhere. News vans camped outside City Hall. Reporters pressed for answers, but the mayor's office issued only brief statements. The fire department refused interviews. For the first time in over a decade, Clearwater felt haunted. It wasn't just that a firefighter had died. It was how, sealed in a tunnel, left without a name, hidden with a man who'd signed off on the cover-up. People whispered about who else knew, who else had helped, and most of all, who was next. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was fear. Because if Daniel's story could be buried, anyone's could. And now that it had cracked open, the whole town was waiting for the rest to fall. Within days, state investigators widened the scope. What started as a cold case had become a full-blown corruption probe. They traced payout records, interviewed former fire staff, dug into zoning approvals and land transfers from the late 70s and early 80s. 3 names surfaced quickly. Raymond Thatch, former city inspector who approved the Wren Rock redevelopment sites. Glenn Tate, a retired fire marshal who couldn't recall key reports. Donald Vexler, a councilman tied to the shell companies receiving insurance payouts. Grand jury subpoenas were issued. Depositions scheduled. But the night before, he was due to testify. Raymond Thatch was found dead, slumped in his garage with the car still running. The coroner ruled it suicide. No note. Just the subpoena sitting unopened on the passenger seat. His widow later told reporters he'd been visibly shaken for weeks, refusing to talk about anything related to Daniel Rourke. The others lawyered up immediately, and for the first time, Clearwater realized how far the rot had spread. What happened to Daniel wasn't one bad decision. It was a system built to protect the secret. And now, piece by piece, that system was collapsing. 12 years after the fire, the funeral Daniel deserved finally took place. Bagpipes played. Flags flew half-mast. Fire trucks lined the cemetery road in a silent row of red and chrome. His children, now grown, wore matching dress blues. His son stood at attention. His daughter, a recent academy graduate, gripped her father's folded coat like armor. Laura knelt by the casket. She didn't cry. She had no tears left. Inside the casket, along with Daniel's remains, she placed 3 things: his wedding band, the map they found in his boot, and the char badge with his name still faintly visible. Rourke. The 12 years of silence ended with the sound of dirt hitting wood. Lavra didn't speak at the service, but she left the crowd with one line, written in the program: Daniel didn't die in the fire. He died trying to tell the truth. There were no heroes in that tunnel, just a man who refused to look away, even when it cost him everything. Justice hadn't come quickly or cleanly, but it had come. And finally, Clearwater had to look itself in the mirror and say his name: Daniel Rourke. The city hoped the funeral would close the door, but Lavra wasn't done. With the help of a civil rights attorney, she filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city, the fire department, and several named officials, including 2 still serving. The discovery process unearthed even more damning details: missing logs, erased communications, and an internal memo from 1981 instructing staff to deprioritize all inquiries regarding Incident 79 barn fire. It wasn't just negligence. It was deliberate. The trial lasted 4 months. Local officials tried to shift blame. Some claimed they were unaware. Others insisted records had been lost in a flood. But the jury saw through it. In the end, the Rourke family won. Not just compensation, though the payout was historic. Won an admission. A signed statement from the city, entered into record, acknowledged that Daniel Rourke had been intentionally misrepresented as a line-of-duty casualty, and that evidence of foul play had been withheld or ignored by city personnel. For Laura, it wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition that her husband's death meant something, that the silence they endured wasn't her imagination, and that the system that buried him would never be allowed to do it again. Mike Rourke didn't go back to firefighting. He started something else. In 1993, just months after the verdict, he launched a nonprofit in his brother's name, the Rourke Foundation for Firefighter Accountability. Its mission was simple but urgent: investigate unsolved firefighter disappearances and deaths tied to land fraud, zoning corruption, or suspicious arsons. He expected maybe a handful of leads. Instead, they poured in anonymous letters, forgotten reports, tip lines from ex-firefighters in Arizona, Ohio, Texas. One email read, "My uncle vanished after a mill fire in '81. They said it was collapse, but we never found him." The pattern Daniel uncovered? It wasn't isolated. The foundation began cataloging cases, cross-referencing property deeds, insurance records, and payout trails. Daniel's story had cracked open a hidden network of buried truths, and Mike was determined to drag every single one into the light. The screen fades to black. Then a single photo appears. Daniel Rourke, smiling in uniform, soot on his face, a helmet tilted under his arm. He looks tired, focused. Like a man who's seen something he can't unsee. The narrator's voice returns, steady, low. Daniel Rourke didn't die in the fire. The image lingers. He died trying to expose one. And for 12 years, they tried to erase him. But truth has a way of burning through. Names change. Buildings fall, but the mark of what Daniel did, what he risked, remains. In the map he left behind. In the badge they tried to bury. And in every case reopened because he refused to stay quiet. Some stories are cautionary. Others are warnings. This one is a reckoning, because justice didn't come fast, but it came, and it spoke one name, over and over, until the world was forced to listen. Daniel Rourke.